Morrowind's development cycle was an interesting one. Although Bethesda was a pretty highly regarded player in the space at the time, the studio was nowhere near as big as it is nowadays, and as such, Morrowind's scope started wide. The map was supposed to be as big as Daggerfall's, one that encompassed the entirety of Morrowind rather than just Vvardenfell. The devs wanted the blight storms which plagued the land to be a persistent force which rolled over cities and left destruction in their wake. And as time went on, Bethesda faced what a lot of modern indie developers face: inevitable trimming. But with this trimming came more experience and focus as Bethesda went on to release Redguard and Battlespire. With each release, the developers got hungrier at the prospect of bringing Morrowind to fruition, while their competitors seemed to release new titles with larger technical capabilities than Bethesda had displayed up until this point. Of course, you can't always do it all. A gigantic map with a dynamic force of devastation roaming across it is easier to do with older tech. Not so much on newer stuff. And hey, you can't expect people to wait over like 12 years for a new Elder Scrolls title, right? So the scale of Morrowind was dialed back, with a lot more focus on what the developers could do instead of what exactly they wanted to do. The end product was a labor of love estimated to take about 100 man-years to create. Or roughly 700 dog years, I guess. Still, Bethesda did want to include more from the start, and the early 2000s was a time of expansion packs and additional content, even if it hadn't been branded as DLC yet. Tribunal was the first of the batch, making its premiere 6 months after the release of Morrowind. The expansion was seen as an overall pretty positive addition to the game, though not incredible by any stretch of the imagination. Bloodmoon, on the other hand, was released a little over a year after the vanilla game and received a lot more attention from fans, as it included the addition of werewolves and a much larger area to explore. Morrowind is one of those games that I really have to be in the right mood to delve back into. It has a fond place in my heart, but many of its mechanics are so clunky, archaic, and very specific to the time that the game was released, which does make complete sense, obviously. As such though, I never got too much into the DLC of the game. And it's honestly a shame because looking into all of these various interviews and behind the scenes really showcases a magical time in video game development when the biggest devs were the most passionate, where the customer was seen as more than a piggy bank for a big publisher. Regardless, that's a whole other topic. In this video, I'm jumping back into Morrowind and taking a look at the Tribunal and Bloodmoon expansions. I'll note what I like and dislike about them, as well as point out what I feel could have been done better and what was executed well overall. Before I begin, I'll note that I have some limited time merch for this video in the form of this funny little man. It'll be up for a good month or two, so have at it if you want it. We're in the process of moving, so every bit helps if you want to support the channel. Alright, let's start with Tribunal. So Tribunal is one of those DLCs that you have based off of one event. And that event is being relentlessly attacked in your sleep at a consistent rate throughout the game until you deal with your attackers. With your attackers being the Dark Brotherhood, you'll feel like you need to take care of this sooner rather than later. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why do these guys attack like this? And while I'd love to tell you that it's a tactical choice based off of a renowned technique known as cheek bending, it's really just because I suck at graphically modding the game. It's probably why my map is just empty now. Either way, after being attacked, you can ask a guard about the Dark Brotherhood. They'll direct you to Ebonheart, and from there you can get teleported to the capital of Morrowind, Mournhold, which is where the source of these attacks seem to be coming from. The Dark Brotherhood in Morrowind is probably one of the most interesting iterations of the guild, seeing as the game's location is the source of it. They're described as an offshoot of the Morag Tong, which is the Assassin's Guild of Morrowind. It's hard to say whether people just missed having the Dark Brotherhood in this game and the devs decided to throw them in here along with Lycanthropy and Bloodmoon, or if it was always in the works to include everything that the older entries had. But I personally was completely fine with the assassins of the game being the Morag Tong, and I like the direction that Bethesda went here with making the Dark Brotherhood have an origin in the faction. Plus, I had a lot of fun running through the Morag Tong quests myself, and I think that supplementing the game with the Brotherhood as an enemy rather than a potential faction to join makes the Morag Tong a lot more distinguished from its ancestor. As such, our purpose here isn't to infiltrate the group as much as it is to wipe them off the map for daring to fuck with the Nerevarine. This sewer area is definitely one of those surprisingly tough areas of the game, where you find out if you're ready or not for Tribunal fast. Technically, I believe the creatures here do scale to your level, as even at level 30, the goblins down here can dish out some damage. But even at lower levels, if you stumble down here with a couple of potions, a mismatched set of leather gear, and a steel sword, you're gonna have a bad time with the ghosts, skeletons, and so on. It kinda makes the Dark Brotherhood's assassination attempts at such early levels kind of silly in my opinion. Not from a lore perspective, but from a gameplay one. When you get attacked at a lower level, it makes it seem like the Tribunal questline is something that you can handle early, and you probably could if you prepared enough. But if you just go down there expecting your enemies to be human, you're in for a rude awakening. Unless you just run past everything, I guess. Regardless, we eventually get to the now fully clothed Dark Brotherhood, who attack on sight, obviously. The most dangerous bit about them is their penchant for poison and paralysis, which they wield effectively. Their leader is the only one without a mask on, and his body yields a little more insight into who's been targeting you. Although the letter simply signs the death warrant with the letter H, you're immediately pointed towards talking with the steward of Almalexia, who's concerned about the newly crowned king of Morrowind, Hlaalu Helseth. Alright, that's 2 H names in one person. Also, the steward's name is FighterZ Hlur, but that's only 1 H. Anyways, brief bit of background lore. I talked about the 3 gods who were counseled to Nerevar forever ago back in my first Morrowind video. I'm not a super big lore guy, so I'll try to sum this up in the most direct way possible. Basically, Almalexia is one of these 3 gods which made up what came to be known as the Tribunal. And after attaining godhood, Almalexia settled down in Mournhold where this DLC takes place. She was seen as a very benevolent and kind god who looked after the Dunmer of Morrowind while healing and protecting them. And that's great and all, but with Tiber Septim conquering the ever-living hell out of everything that he could, Vivek decided to sign a treaty with Septim shortly after he declared war on Morrowind, making it part of Imperial rule. So now we have a god and a human king ruling over Mournhold. Though on paper it was only the king who had the power here, while Almalexia only had power over Mournhold's religious temples. You see why this might be a tremendous source of civil conflict. Oh, and also Almalexia more or less stopped appearing in public after she lost her powers of divinity when Dagoth-Ur cut them off. So yeah, there's quite a bit of nuance to navigate here. So back to FighterZ, who tells you that he's discovered that the recently crowned king is training an army of goblins. I don't know why either, I guess just because they're tough. But yeah, obviously we can't just have a little goblin army running around, that's ridiculous. And so it's suggested that you go and kill these goblins like that's something that you could just do without invoking the wrath of an imperial sworn monarch. Again, FighterZ is a temple man who reports to Almalexia. He doesn't give a shit about the king compared to his lady. So ordering you to destroy something that he deems preposterous isn't out of the realm of possibility here. Of course, you can also play for the other side and report to the captain of the royal guard to help out the king instead of Almalexia. This was more intriguing than slaying goblins. So I got to work asking around about what people thought of the former king's death. After canvassing the area, it's discovered that a newspaper has been circulating a story about Helseth being involved with 3 prominent figures who all mysteriously died after. The newspaper attempts to cover its own ass by stating that they would never openly imply that Helseth was a master poisoner. But the point of the article has still stuck to some people's minds, and has led to them whispering about Helseth poisoning the former king in order to usurp the position for himself. This whole investigation route for the Imperial side of Mournhold has much more intrigue overall, and it's real fun to try to dig into both Helseth and Almalexia's motives at this point in time. As such, your next task for the captain is to head over to the temple where you listen to a devout follower of Almalexia. She explains that she's afraid of her god now, that while the things being preached here are still about kindness and healing, that there are more dire undertones of punishing the sinners and rewarding the devout. And then she goes, "Oh yeah, we're gonna kill Helseth for sure, dude." Oh, cool, thanks. That was way easier than I thought it'd be. Yeah, the reason that these guys don't want Helseth around is because he's smart. The previous king was seen as a bit of a doofus, so it was a lot easier to just ignore the guy. But Helseth is malicious and calculating. See the literal goblin army for more details. This investigation continues for a bit, having a look into potential disloyalty among the royal guard itself, infiltrating the manor of the former king, sussing out a conspiracy to kill Helseth, killing off the conspirators, and figuring out who's behind the newspaper that's actively working against Helseth. Of course, you can stop anywhere you want to in this process, or even choose to let the conspirators go instead of killing them, which is great for continuing to roleplay the way that you want your Nerevarine to act. For example, I imagine that a Nerevarine who chose House Hlaalu might have an interest in letting these rebels go who had their king assassinated. But I was a Redoran guy for this playthrough, and also I got in deep with the Imperial Legion, so it seems a lot more obvious for me to side with Helseth here. Though all of that said, I'm also the Grandmaster of the Morag Tongue, and I know that Helseth has the Dark Brotherhood in his back pocket, which he sicked on me for some reason, so I could see my guy going after him too. I won't run through the specifics of this entire investigation period, but I really did enjoy the final bit where you go after the leader of the newspaper. The whole thing involves an awful lot of persuading to get people to open up about where they might have even heard about an anonymous writer, which eventually yields a name. If you've been paying attention, you'll have seen the name Varys, particularly around the temple area. These would be the reporter's mom and dad, who also cover for him in their own way. When you do eventually figure out where the hideout of the reporter is, which is tactfully hidden behind a door that has a big "Keep Out" sign on it, you can then use that knowledge to threaten the guy into not reporting on the king anymore. Of course, you could also kill him, bribe him, or let him go, but I thought the optional threat was a nice touch. If you manage to get the reporter to stop without killing him, you get rewarded with a really high-end sword, which the captain claims can specifically kill thieves and traitors with deadly curses. I mean, I imagine that health drain, paralysis, and holy hellfire will kill more than just thieves and traitors, but maybe they're particularly susceptible to these things. Alright, let's get back to the goblins. Your goal here is to take out the 2 war chiefs and optionally some Altmer trainers. The sewer cave system is absolutely massive, and you can tell that it's kind of here to be the de facto dungeon of Tribunal. I've never been a huge fan of sprawling, samey-looking sewer and cave systems, and this is no exception. The low-stakes intrigue of a sewer system is a very tame start that only gets worse as things open up into a pretty average-looking goblin cave. I don't know, maybe this was incredible back in 2002, but it just doesn't do it for me now. That, and I was kind of hoping to see a somewhat organized-looking pack of goblins that could constitute an army. Instead, they kinda just patrol around like you would expect out of any other goblin cave in these games. So the fact that the king was training these was more of a flavor addition than a feature. The reward for doing all of this nets you a whopping 15,000 gold, further pressing the idea that this is later game content or at least mid. This gold boon only paves the way to even greater fortune though, as the mighty Todd Howard has saw fit to bestow an escort mission unto you. Oh baby, it doesn't get any better than that. So back into the sewers with a member of the Blue Man group to cleanse a shrine. You know, the sewer shrine. The shrine that we placed in the sewer. Nah, I'm kidding, it's in a crypt that's accessed from the sewer, which somehow makes it better. Of course, with the crypt comes skeletons. Oh fuck, over encumber me, will you? Just wait until I drop this raw ebony that I was carrying around for some reason. So yeah, same thing as before, except spookier. I will say that you don't have to keep Dickhead following you at all times, and thank God for that because he dies pretty quickly. When you're through with the shrine cleansing, you hike all the way back to these guys at the temple who go, "Oh yeah, there's another thing down there where you just came from. Go fetch it." Jesus Christ, dude. I'd say that they should have laid all of this on me at once, but technically these boulders collapsed right as I entered the crypt before, which cut me off from access to the skeleton man who had the artifact that they want. But just jumping at the pile made it so that I could get through the rubble, and I just didn't know that I needed the stupid ring from one of the dead people. Now the temple has cleared the debris so that I could get the artifact, and that's technically the reason why the quest is staggered out like this. Still, it's really damn annoying quest structure when compared to the stuff that I did for the King's Men before this. After bringing the ring back to Almalexia, she thanks you and tells you to be on your way, which leads to a 24-hour waiting period in which there are no more main quests. Like I said, the temple side of the questing here is obnoxious by comparison to the investigations that the Royal Guard sent you on. Which is funnier when you realize that the Royal Guard stuff was all completely optional. So the annoying stuff is mandatory and the fun stuff isn't. Good call there. After 24 hours goes by, strange creatures begin mysteriously attacking Mournhold, which leads you to having to choose whether or not you want to help the Royal Guard or the temple in figuring out where these fabricants came from. It doesn't really matter who I pick here, but the Royal Guard gets my support just based off of the previous leg of questing. The creatures themselves are really off-putting to look at, and remind me a bit of the Charis in Skyrim and ESO. At this point they've been traced back to a Dwemer rune that was discovered under the plaza where all of these things attacked. Popping down there to see what's going on yields a scene of fighting between the Fabricants and the Dwemer constructs, which is confusing seeing as everyone was certain that the Fabricants were of the same make as the constructs. Reporting this knowledge back to the captain has him directing you to the king, who goes, "Oh shit, right, you were the one that we, tried to have assassinated." Well, I mean, you know how it goes. We were misinformed and thought you wanted me dead or something. I don't know. Did you kill my goblins, by the way? Yeah, the reality is that this guy's been killing anyone deemed a threat to his power for years now. And I'm guessing some prophecy foretold person running around and gaining influence was easily going to be on the chopping block with how many others he's put to the sword. But whatever, not the first dude who's tried to kill us. So after telling the captain about this crazy shit that we just saw, the king is like, "Oh, hey, there might be some other random plot against me right now. Yeah, go check that shit out." I don't know, King. This other thing that I found might just be a bit more pressing. Okay, I'll go check it out, I guess. This is again totally optional, and you could have skipped over it by reporting back to FighterZ if you wanted. So you head to the king's informant and they tell you that his mother, the queen, is going to be attacked. You report this to Helseth, who tells you to lie in wait outside of her chambers for the assassins. And surprisingly, or unsurprisingly enough,
supposed to be here somewhere. He told us in the Queen Mother's chambers, behind the screen.
Yeah, Helseth sent the Dark Brotherhood after you again. For some reason, it doesn't work out this time either. Of course, Helseth doesn't confirm this, he just commends you for being trustworthy and strong. I love this line of questing though, because I've been handed about 40 reasons to commit regicide at this stage, but I can also just continue to try to prove myself to the king if I want to. Plus, I did kill this guy's goblins and he just never mentions that, so I guess we're even-ish. Either way, the final optional quest here comes in the form of dueling Helseth's best and most loyal guard. And now Helseth trusts you. Well, trust is a strong word with him, but he at least trusts you enough to go and probe Almalexia for answers as to where the Fabricants came from. Helseth believes that they're the creations of the third god king of the Tribunal, Sotha-Sil. Of course, Almalexia does the same sort of thing that Helseth does, where she doesn't really answer anything and instead just claims that there's a cult that just popped up and I'm to investigate it. At least this one is more than just a test of loyalty, as the cultists have begun committing ritual suicide for some reason. And apparently that's bothering people or something. At least enough to distract them from the literal monsters that are running around part of the town. The reason that we're given the task of tracking down this cult does make a bit more sense later. But for now, when talking to the leader, he claims that they're a peaceful cult. And here's the kicker. This guy and his cult believes that the Tribunal's gods are going to lose their powers soon. He believes that this era will end in a fit of destruction. And he believes that the gates of Oblivion will open across Tamriel and that Daedra will pour through them. Man, these guys really had this stuff planned out for a long ass time, didn't they? I don't know, I thought this was a fun touch. But yeah, Almalexia is pissed. And we get a taste of the reason why the follower from before is afraid of her, as the goddess now bluntly states that she will let these naysayers know that the Tribunal is nowhere near powerless. She does this by having me go down into the Dwemer ruin to activate a weather system that will create an ash storm in Mournhold. I don't know what this has to do with showing her power or why I would even do it, but let me tell you something. Not even I, the questionless player character, am going to sink so low as to unleash an ash storm onto the capital of Morrowind.
Come.
Yes, ma'am.
He is a hard man, all right.
Now, I gotta say, I've given some Dwemer ruins flack in the past, at least concerning the ones that always pop up frequently in Skyrim. They always felt much too long and repetitive for me to really appreciate them by the end. But I gotta say, I actually kind of like these ones. Yes, of course, there are really only the same 3 or 4 enemies, and the halls all kind of look the same also. But it didn't feel dragged out, and there's definitely this sense of, I guess, previous life throughout them. I don't know, maybe I was just in the right mood. But I also like the bit where you could take these explosives and blow a hole into parts of the wall here, one of which leads to a whole offshoot of Daedra-infested caves. Also, the weather system itself is pretty cool. Though I gotta wonder why these guys decided that they needed a fucking volcano option. Yeah, rain is cool and all, but have we considered adding a choking ash option? I feel like that'd be fun for mandatory quarantines. Returning to the surface reveals that the hellish ash storms have indeed invaded the city. The guards are like, yeah, that's weird, but it's nothing to worry about. The citizens, on the other hand, are shitting in their pants, as you might expect. Almalexia is pleased and continues to huff and puff about how great she is and how much magic she still has before she assigns you her next task. And I gotta say, the questing layout of Tribunal is really damn odd. Like, it feels like the devs keep building up bigger and bigger tasks, like more things are happening. But then in between that building up, they'll suddenly toss out a strange request. Like Helseth's testing of you that didn't really lead to anything more concerning the fabricants that were infiltrating the city. And now we have another instance of that. Now, I know why Almalexia would stall here, and I'll again get to that in a moment, but instead of proceeding to a phase of this plan where she has you taking out the cultists or something along those lines, she goes, "Oh yeah, one of my loyal guards went crazy and is now yelling slurs at the citizens of Mournhold. Could you kill him for me? Yeah, thanks." After killing the guy, Almalexia feels like you've proven yourself to be the real reincarnation of her lost husband Nerevar. Apparently killing Dagoth and putting an end to everything else wasn't enough. It was killing her crazy servant and controlling the weather that did it for her. Well, now she wants you to join or rejoin her by collecting pieces of Nerevar's shattered blade and reforging it. This is a pretty lengthy endeavor which has you snatching up the two other pieces that you need. One's with the guy that you defeated in the duel, and the other's at this museum, which I like as a concept. It's basically a place to display and store all of the unique weapons and armor in the game. They pay a load of coin for each one, making it pretty lucrative also. Of course, in order to get the piece of blade from them, you'll need to donate 2 bits of equipment free of charge. Fortunately, I've been collecting some unique things for a while now, so that wasn't really an issue, nor was reforging the blade at the local smith. The problem is that the blade used to be on fire. In a good way, of course. And that was the work of the Dwemer who crafted the thing forever ago. And those guys are all dead now. Well, except for one. So it's back down to the ruins to gather up some knowledge. Now this bit of the game is something I don't quite agree with. It's kind of like the spirit of the girl who appears in Fallout 2, though to a lesser degree, I suppose. Because there are actually wraiths and whatnot in the Elder Scrolls. But basically every Dwemer is dead except for one guy that you met in the vanilla part of the game. And yet now there's this ghost of a Dwemer craftsman who's just kind of floating around down here. You approach him and ask him about getting the sword to catch fire, and he explains that he needs a certain oil from the Daedra caves nearby. And then he enchants the blade and that's that. It's one of the biggest problems with the dialogue being presented the way that it is in Morrowind. Because the average person is gonna go, "Holy shit, a real Dwemer, I have so many questions." But you don't get any options outside of, "Hey, can you make my blade go?" I don't know. I get that you get a bit of first-hand knowledge out of old Yagrum, but you never really get to play that curious character unless the writers want it. The disappearance of the Dwemer is one of the biggest plot points of the game, and they just decided to shove another one in here only for him to light your pointy stick on fire and float away. Well, whatever. I do at least like that the guy's like, "Enchanter? Nah, I'm just a guy who knows how to invent fire on weapons." Like, these guys just invented constantly only for it to be viewed as magic later on by other races. Speaking of unquestioningly shoving onward, Almalexia now wants me to kill Sotha Sil for the finale of the Tribunal DLC. While you've been goofing off with all of this stuff, the goddess has apparently traced the fabricants back to Sotha Sil for sure. Or so she claims at least. She elaborates that the god hasn't been himself, that he's been delving further into the realm of Sheogorath with the way that he's been behaving. So we're off to his Clockwork City, which is a place that I'm actually familiar with from Elder Scrolls Online. I always appreciated the idea of the place, and the original game's rendition is no exception. The entire place starts pretty tame, with little levers to pop open the lid on these doors throughout your crawl. But then you get to the loud part. And this noise stays for pretty much the rest of the dungeon. I know you might be thinking that that's annoying, and yeah, sure, it kind of is. But there's something to be said about sound design that takes away quiet pockets of noise by drowning it out. It makes it so that you're a lot more on edge about creatures and traps, as you're not always going to be able to tell where something is coming from. And it fundamentally made me go a lot slower, to stop and look before moving on. It's a really cool part of this DLC, and it serves for a pretty damn neat finale. After running through multiple puzzles, shifting pieces, creatures, and machines, we finally make it to Sotha Sil, who's strung up in a gruesome fashion. Turning to leave has Almalexia appearing before you to tell you that her plan was to re-establish her waning power through fear. That by sending you in as a martyr and telling people that you served her, that she would be able to control people and boot out the invading Imperials. This is the best explanation as to why so many of her quests involved you running around and doing seemingly random things to boost her influence while a supposed threat to the city was looming just beneath it. Although I gotta say, giving me like a big fire sword, one of the best swords in the game, probably not the best call when you're about to fight me, but, well, I guess she does say that she thought that you would die to the Clockwork City, which, after defeating Dagother, it doesn't take that into account at all. It acts like you just didn't do that when interacting with these people. I don't know. Of course she gets bonked like the rest of them, but she puts up a pretty good fight at least. And that's pretty much it for Tribunal. Azura pops by with her definitely intentional and not mod-related missing neck, and tells you that you're a good boy. Oh, and that the Tribunal is all dead and that this is a good thing. Then old No-Neck drunkenly shambles away to tell other people about how their god's dying and their overall future being doomed is just fantastic. Overall, it's a pretty good DLC. I can see why people weren't hyping it up when it released just due to a lot of the pacing of the questing and the fact that it's constrained to one city with a load of sewers and caves underneath it. But I did enjoy a lot of the investigation parts in addition to the Clockwork City and the Dwemer Ruin areas. It's just a solid and unoffensive expansion that could have done with a bit more focus in some areas and extrapolation in others. And I'd say that it deserves a playthrough just to witness the end of these three god kings. Alright, onward to Bloodmoon. So this one's quite a bit bigger than Tribunal, and as such encompasses the island of Solstheim to the north of Vardenfell. The first thing that you'll see after getting off the boat is the illustrious Fort Frostmoth. This is the entry point into the DLC, and while you could just walk past it, it's pretty good at setting up the main factions of this whole thing. The fort is, not a great place to be if you're an Imperial soldier. It's basically viewed as punishment for those who have acted out of line or the like. And the group of misfits all consistently complain about simply being on Solstheim. As such, the captain here immediately assigns you a quest to boost the morale of his troops, which only really works out logistically since my guy's been heavily involved with Imperial affairs at this stage. Otherwise, I'm just a random dude who showed up on a boat. The troops are currently pissed off because they think that their captain banned booze. But what really happened was the priest confiscated all of the alcohol in the hopes that he could incite a rebellion, with the goal of getting the fuck out of Fort Frostmoth.
Stuck here forever. I'll die.
You can choose whether to turn the priest over or let him go, which only really affects the reward that you get. Next, we've got to break up a smuggling ring which has been stealing weapons from the fort. This quest allows you to choose between a fierce warrior who doesn't really have any knowledge about the goings-on here, or a not-so-stellar fighter who's gotten along well with his fellow alcoholics. Whichever you choose will assist you in tracking down and or fighting the smuggling ring, though the guy who's good at talking makes information gathering go a lot smoother, and can actually broker a deal between the head smuggler to give up without a fight. Oh hey, this guy wants us to let him go without a fight. Hey Lucius, this guy wants to give up.
Die, scoundrel!
After all of this is done, it's back to the fort, which has been attacked in the very, very brief span of time that we were gone for. And by werewolves, no less. And they took the captain. Well, shit. Yeah, the warrior lady who we didn't take in the last quest explains that she thinks that this was the work of the Nords on the tip of the island. So I gotta go meet with those guys now. And this is where you can really start to explore Solstheim if you're going from quest to quest. It's a snowy island reminiscent of some kind of northern landscape. Like a forest, forest dense, cold and icy, Nord-filled. I don't know. I'm just getting an awful lot of Skyrim vibes from this island. It feels like the devs might have stolen from Bethesda. How has no one caught this yet? But yeah, a lot of sites that you're gonna see are gonna be pretty familiar in this day and age. As ass backwards as it is, I actually recognize a few sites from the Dragonborn DLC, which is kinda cool in retrospect. In terms of enemy variety, there are plenty of wolves, bears, draugrs, and boars. But the Spriggans, Reeklings, and Gralls are the ones that stick out to me much more. Oh, and the Horkers, those ones are my favorites. I will say that the draugrs are a lot faster than their Skyrim counterparts, making them charging at you pretty intimidating when you aren't ready for it. The Spriggans actually have 3 lives and resurrect even tougher after going down each time, which I believe is something that they did in Daggerfall. I thought that switching to fire might have been the solution at first, but they just always have 3 lives. Though if you are quick enough, you can just loot them the first time that they go down and then chop them up into firewood before they can regrow. I wonder if this was deemed to be too frustrating of a skill for them to have from Oblivion onward. The Reeklings, on the other hand, are these goofy little ice goblins that snap at your ankles or mount the boars so they can snap at your knees instead. And the Grolls are these odd-looking ice troll type entities, and they're kinda just goofy and don't really do too much more than just swing. After killing every Nord, animal, and spirit in a 5-mile radius on my way to the Skaal village, I'm told by the village's leader that these filthy Imperials do nothing but harm the earth with their digging, building, and chopping. But he also says that they had nothing to do with the werewolf attacks. And that's good enough for me. I believe anyone who's willing to talk to me in this game, really. I do gotta say, for as frequent as race comes up in Morrowind, it hardly ever matters which race I am to anyone. Which is fine and all, but I kinda hope that the Nords would at least go, "Oh hey yo, another Nord," before telling me to pack sand. At any rate, returning to the fort has the warrior lady telling you that you're an idiot for coming back without finding out what happened to the captain, and insists that you go settle into the village, find a job, get a wife, have some children, and earn the Skaal's trust before you can figure out if they're lying or not. I was hoping for another objective, a handful of gold, a firm handshake, something for hoofing it back. But here I am. So let's break here and take a look at the other big thing to do in Bloodmoon. The East Empire Company is a mercantile company that has made appearances in the 2 sequels after Morrowind, though only ever as some miscellaneous questing for the most part. I've always enjoyed the idea of being able to join a faction of merchants, which is ironic because that's exactly what you could do in Bloodmoon. As such, you have your ranking system which favors the skills of speechcraft, mercantile, longblade, medium armor, and security. I am so fucked. But hey, maybe I can switch over to a longblade and hope to move it up in time for promotions. So this whole thing starts out pretty tame, as most guilds do. Escort people, gather ore, send away a crazy Nord who's complaining about the land being pillaged, etc, etc, etc. Throughout this, it's clear that the head of this operation is a ruthless and cruel businessman who only cares about profit, while his second in command is someone who cares about doing things the right way for the settlers of Raven Rock. Oh yeah, the place that the East Empire Company has decided to build as a trading hub is called Raven Rock. The coolest part about these quests is that every time you complete a task or two, you'll have to wait around. And after waiting, more of Raven Rock is built, which is a really fun idea. I would have at least liked to have been able to set the layout myself, but that might have been a little bit too much to ask for at this point in time. Eventually, you have to choose who you ultimately want to help throughout this whole thing, with the very black or white decision yielding very black or white results for the EEC. You'll make less money if you side with the good people here, but I mean, I started Tribunal with just under 10k gold, and I'm sitting at about 221k now. I don't really know why these guys decided to basically make wealth meaningless in the DLC, but I guess I'm here for it. Even when you do choose a side, many of your quests are going to be the same anyways, which is a bit lame. But my bigger issue is that when I chose the good guy, Falco, he still requires me to run all the way to the main guy and tell him about every little thing that's happening with the construction. So for example, you decide to quiz the settlers on whether they want a smithy or a trader. And then you have to go report it to the main guy, Carnius. Then you have to go back to Falco and he tells you to wait until the construction is done. And then after you're done waiting, he tells you, yeah, go back to Carnius. And then Carnius goes, yeah, great, who cares, why are you telling me this? The back and forth here is abysmal, and it really weighs this whole process down. Regardless, you do eventually stop reporting to Carnius and keep hitting up Falco. Quests which are shared between the two quest givers include the building choice that I just mentioned, scaring a guy who's demanding a load of extra payment for his work, calming down or killing a guy who's starting bar brawls, learning how to mine a material to create ice equipment, killing off Spriggans, and hiring guards. The last two in particular are really boring quests with zero notable twists or interesting dialogue, and felt more like busy work to advance Raven Rock's build progress rather than inspired and unique quests that only the EEC could provide. When the quests do split, the differences don't start off super imaginative, but do ramp up pretty quickly. As such, the first quest simply has you tracking down a guy who's stealing ore for Falco or helping the thief steal the ore for Carnius. But the next quest involves you having to deliver an urgent report to Carnius for Falco, or stopping a different messenger for Carnius. If I had sided the other way here, I would have found out that the crazy Nord from before who was cutting off access to the mine was actually one of Carnius's men. Stopping Falco's messenger means killing him with the crazy Nord by my side, and then killing the crazy Nord afterwards for knowing too much. But since I sided with Falco, I'm told to deliver a report to Carneus as fast as I can, or Falco will be in big trouble. When I get back to where Carneus usually is, his underling tells me that he's out and about and that I'll have to find him. Walking back out of the building springs a trap which lowers my speed and agility by 80, as well as burdens the shit out of me, meaning that I have to chug potions to get to Carneus on time. If I fail this, I get permanently kicked out of the East Empire Company, which is a pretty crazy and fun ramification. The last 2 quests for each side involve the assassination of Falco and the siege of Raven Rock. With the first one, you're either protecting or assassinating Falco yourself, which I admit the protection of him to be a lot more boring. When working for Carneus, you'll be hitting Falco from afar with a poison-tipped arrow, whereas what I experienced was the 3 men attacking and then dying pretty easily. The finale involves either setting up the siege to kill Raven Rock or defending the colony from the attackers. With the defense, things go about as you'd expect.
This is too easy. 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 This is too easy.
May you find me worthy of your attention.
Shockingly enough, a note is found on one of these guys stating that they're to attack the colony and make it look like the Skaal did it. Carneus picks out the super cool nickname of C to sign the note with, and isn't very amused when you show it to him. He attacks, you kill him, Falco makes you head of the guild even if you don't have the stats, so I trained with a fucking longsword this whole time for nothing. Carneus's route is again the more interesting one, in which he has you taking the equipment necessary for the siege to the Nords that he hired, only for them to state that he paid them to kill you. From here it's business as usual, and although the betrayal was expected out of the shrewd man that is Carneus, it's a more interesting bit of questing all things considered. The aftermath of all of this allows you to choose a place to construct your own manor here in Raven Rock, which is pretty cool. Again, I would have loved to have been able to design it a bit at a time, but the game has a hard enough time just rendering new bits into the colony, often making you wait elsewhere before it updates. Still, even with this limitation, it would have been fun to have chosen a few presets for your estate. Overall, the East Empire Company is a good proof of concept. The idea of constructing a colony out of nothing is really fun, and I think that it would have been amazing as tech evolved to allow this whole process to go more smoothly. With all that said, this is the entire draw of the faction, as the quests are lacking in most areas. Choosing a side doesn't really drastically alter too much, even though they kinda set it up to be a thing where you murder everyone and raise the colony on Carneus's end, only for the writers to pull out at the last moment and have it be a betrayal kind of thing. Most of the quests were very by the books and basic though, with not a lot of twists or intrigue for my liking. I didn't mind the faction, but I didn't really love it either. Moving back to Viking Quest 2003 has us trying to gain the trust of Denmark so that they can help us against the English or something along those lines. The Skaal are still pissed about the Imperials digging around their land, and for some reason I'm the one that needs to atone for it or something. So I'm directed towards the shaman who gives me a fucking novel to read. Come on fellas, I play Nintendo games, I'm not here to read. But yeah, kind of like Dragonborn later emulated, this whole ordeal has you visiting shrines and performing rituals. Instead of fighting big-ass giants though, you have to follow instructions for 6 different stones that all take you to various parts of the map. It's actually a super fun quest in its own right, and pretty damn lengthy. The storybook that the shaman hands you is more to give you a little insight into what these nature-bound people believe, and its tribal myths help you to flesh out what you're doing at each stone. The Beast Stone has you rescuing a polar bear before pulling an arrow out from it and healing it up. The Windstone has you heading to a nearby cave and opening a big-ass bag of winds, which causes all of the torches to go out. The Waterstone has you following a Horker, which leads you to an underwater cave, which was my personal favorite because a fucking skeleton charged me as soon as I made it out of the near-drowning experience. Your Earthstone involves you lumbering through a cave that emits a rumbling noise in a song pattern that you have to replicate by activating stalagmites. The Treestone simply has you killing a Reekling, stealing the seeds that it has on it, and planting them. And the Sunstone has you killing Dave Grohl, throwing his eye at a wall and watching as light fills the cavern. I mean, it's some really cool shit all things considered, especially at this point in time. I enjoyed this quest thoroughly, as it guided me across Solstheim to see a lot of what it had to offer, as opposed to the EEC, which just kind of had me running from one place to the next repeatedly. The second test to win over the Skaal is investigating a crime where one village member has stolen from another. The issue is that everyone sees the potential perpetrator here as a very honorable man who would never do such a thing. And they see the accuser as someone who's a little seedy. So yeah, apparently these guys just take accusations like this and just hand them off to outsiders or something. Well, it becomes apparent pretty quickly that our boy Icemane, who's had this accusation hurled at him, has been getting cucked on the side by his wife who's been seeing the accuser while her husband goes out hunting. Taking a look around yields a letter from the accuser to Icemane's wife, who goes, "Ah, so you found the letter. Well, that shit only happened once, and he's wanted me ever since, and please save my husband, he's a good man." Man, fuck that shit. This quest is infuriating because when you present all of the evidence to the chief of the village, he's like, "Ah, so this was a false accusation. Alright, so are we sending the accuser away into exile, or should we rev up the ceremonial wolves so he can die to them? Brother in Christ, can we discuss the wife who didn't want to fess up until we found the letter?" Anyways, I chose death by Minecraft wolves. I mean, come on. You don't get to see that every day. The final test comes in the form of diving under the lake here to take care of a Draugr lord that's made his home in the caves beneath. When you make it to him, he speaks to you, claiming that he used to be Skaal himself. After being exiled for messing with necromancy, he found himself here before realizing that Daedra were threatening to infiltrate Solstheim. He erected a barrier to keep them from moving further inland before transforming himself into a Draugr so that he could indefinitely hold them at bay. If you want to, you can slay him anyway, or you can choose to join him in eliminating the Frost Atronachs in the cave, which is a fun subversion of expectations. I'm not so picky that I want every quest to be this stellar, twist-filled amalgam of quest design, and I think that just having your main tasks turn out to have these little extras really help to flesh out your overall quest design. I'm actually real impressed with everything that I've seen from the Skaal so far, which honestly wasn't what I was expecting when I initially hit up their pretty average-looking shaman village. So let's hit up the finale of the village, where the questing splits into two paths. This time I'll be playing through both sides to get a better feel of the DLC. When you get back to the Skaal village, the chief goes, "Oh, that's cool. Yeah, give me a moment." Which usually means some shit is about to go down. This time the shit going down is werewolves.
This is too easy.
The end result of this attack is you becoming infected, and this is where your major choice is. Either you let yourself transform or you cure yourself and continue with the Skaal. My issue with this choice is how little the game gives you a reason to actually become a werewolf. Like you've been actively working with the Skaal here to get close to them, performing tasks, solving their problems, being praised and admired by them. Then this happens and it's like, okay, yeah, admiration and acceptance by a group of people is cool and all, but you're telling me I could become a fucking werewolf? Like, there's no other faction that pulls you aside and tells you about how the werewolves are being persecuted or whatever. Your biggest reasoning for becoming one is the devs going, yeah, the players are gonna choose this 100%. The quests that come from either route are two sides of the same coin, a lot like the EEC quests. With the Skaal side, you're now actively working against the Bloodmoon prophecy by performing a ritual and fighting off the werewolves. Since I never mentioned what the Bloodmoon prophecy actually is, I'll cover that real quick. The whole thing revolves around the Daedra Lord Hircine, and his everlasting goal of inflicting the Great Hunt onto the people of Nirn every era. There are various signs that the Great Hunt is about to happen, all of which have happened or do happen during this series of questing. The main ones would be werewolves appearing and the moon turning fucking red. This prophecy leads into a Great Hunt, with varying goals and participants, which the finale of the DLC revolves around. So with the Skaal side, you're trying to win the favor of the gods to hopefully stop the prophecy or at least bless the Skaal people to come out the other side of it or something. And that involves picking up a totem from a cave and performing a ritual with it. During the ritual itself, 2 of your hunting companions die before you're jumped by 3 werewolves, which was probably the first Elder Scrolls related jump scare that I've experienced since I was in high school. After completing the ritual, another sign of the Great Hunt occurs on the northern shores, leading us to investigate the castle nearby to see if the local friendly giant that resides there is behind the Horker massacre that took place. The hierarchy here seems to be a lot of the area's Reeklings serving the giant, but talking to one of the Reeklings inside the caverns behind the castle has him telling you that the giant simply disappeared one day, and that the Reeklings decided to take over. So your entire mission here is defeating some Grolls, making it into the castle, and talking to another Reekling. The problem is that when you make it into the castle proper, a group of Reeklings attack you. So my thought was, well, looks like I have to kill them all. But when I head into the next room, there's this one Reekling just kinda meandering around, who I decided looked dangerous and I took Sunder to with impunity, turning him into blueberry jam. Turns out that that was the other one that I had to talk to. I just hate that this game really punishes you for trying to get the jump on enemies at times. I had to reload to get it right, which is actually the second time that this happened to me during the DLC. The other time was during the siege on the mine for the EEC, in which I thought one of the miners was with the attackers. I didn't mention it before because the miner was very clearly a Dunmer and not a Nord, and I just kinda goofed up there. But this is just clearly another Reekling but with a name. I don't know. Regardless, this Reekling reveals that his master was taken by the werewolves as a participant in the Great Hunt, which pieces together the last bit of this puzzle, seeing as the chief of the Skaal tribe and the captain of Fort Frostmoth have also disappeared suddenly. Sure enough, sleeping hits you with another werewolf jump scare, as you're taken to the Great Hunt's grounds. This finale is absolutely brutal, like probably the hardest part of this game by far, at least to me. Your entire goal is to navigate these mazes and fight to the center of the hunting grounds against a constant flood of werewolves that have a tendency to continue to jump scare the player throughout it. Each werewolf is an absolute hammer sponge, and they hit like a Mack truck. I mean, my gear was completely shredded after the very first arena, prompting me to reload and try again with more potions and repair hammers. At first I was actually a little annoyed with this spectacle. I mean, you're fighting through the same enemy type over and over on your way to the middle of this thing, and the combat of Morrowind is serviceable at best. But I think the actual challenge of it had me respecting the dungeon crawl by the end of the whole ordeal. I don't know, it's really tough, but I would still say that I overall appreciated the Clockwork City more. Along the way, you'll run into others who had been kidnapped. The captain dies pretty easily, though you can keep him alive if you patch him up. I did not keep him alive. The Skaal Chief holds his own against the werewolves well, but turns on you while revealing that he succumbed to lycanthropy at one point. And the giant is, well, he's just a giant who attacks you immediately. After making it to the center of this thing, Hircine reveals himself and prompts you to fight him as his prey. You get to choose which form you want him to fight as, which varies between a bear, a wolf, or an average man wielding an insane amount of Valium. The three creatures I personally fear the most. The fight is about the same in terms of toughness as fighting one maze werewolf, which I thought was a bit lame, but whatever. For each form that you defeat, you'll gain a different reward, which is a fun bit of added replayability. And then that's all there is to it. There's a cutscene that plays out with Hircine vowing to return to Tamriel one day, and the glacial area around the northwestern fringe crumbling and cracking. It's a nice little scene to wrap everything up, all things considered. But we gotta get over to the werewolf side of these missions before hitting the conclusion of this video. So waiting around for 3 days has a cutscene playing out where you transform into a werewolf and begin obeying Hircine. After signing up for a Fur Affinity account and picking out a cool name,
Saberwolf,
I can begin anew as a Wolf of the Night, which is fucking hilarious in every sense. Your stats get skewed so that you have a ridiculous amount of strength, speed, and jump, and you're required to kill one human before the night's end or suffer from withdrawals, a lot like vampirism. It's very fun to run around and just jump across the landscape like a coked up linebacker, but the actual combat has you kind of slowly patting down your enemies, which isn't the best. I always felt like this kind of mechanic was a fun idea, but not even Skyrim made it feel good enough for me to want to do it for more than 10 or so minutes, honestly. Regardless, Hircine hits you up after your first night to tell you to go guard the totem in the cave that the Skaal sent you to before. I don't know why, it didn't seem to affect the outcome of the hunt. It just feels like this was here for the sole purpose of having you play on the opposite team. But I think that if these guys had come up with some other random hunting quest, it would have further shown that the superstitious Skaal had no real bearing on the Great Hunt occurring or not. Regardless, the defense mission is annoying, because it isn't simply killing every Skaal in a cave, it's waiting for more to spawn and stopping them as they approach the chest with the totem. I have so many skits that I want to fit in here that I'm just gonna put them all in at once.
All the way up and still going to the 35, and he's not down yet.
Searching. Canvassing.
I've got the cure for your
Target
curse right
acquired.
here.
But yeah, this quest is boring after the initial clearing of the cave. When you do get it done and wait until you transform again, Hircine will reward you with a damage boost to your claws, which is cool in a way. Unfortunately, the basis for this next quest is also pretty dumb because, well, it's the exact same thing as the Skaal side, but this time you're killing the Nords. Yeah, the setup for this one is, oh hey, they took the totem anyway, and they're doing their silly little ritual that doesn't really affect anything, stop them. So yeah, not great. Your reward this time is a Bone Wolf summon that you can only use when human, mirroring the Spirit Wolves and Bear summons that you get on the Skaal side. This would have been a lot cooler if you could use it while in werewolf form, but I guess it's just another swing and a miss for the werewolf side of things. The final quest before the Great Hunt is running through the same ice palace and killing everything, which, yeah, broken record. I don't know, it just doesn't feel great beyond the actual speed and jumping power of being a werewolf. When all is said and done, you're summoned to the hunt where the captain attacks you on sight so that you can fulfill your need to kill a human for the night. This does not matter at all at this difficulty, seeing as a single werewolf is going to reduce you to at least half health while fighting it, and you obviously can't use any items in werewolf form. To fight everything here as a werewolf is absolutely impossible, and doesn't leave you any option besides just waiting to transform back or jump past everything on the map. It's really silly and feels like it should have been addressed during the balancing phase. The final fights are at least no problem, and the end result is the same except that you can't loot Hircine's body as a beast. Overall, being a werewolf is fun to experience for a bit, but hardly worth it during the quests. I really would have loved to have seen some custom-tailored hunt quests that didn't revolve around taking out Skaal. Maybe a bit where you go with other werewolves to kidnap the giant. Stuff like that. As things stand, this side of questing was pretty damn lame. There is one final quest to cure your lycanthropy at the end of all of this, seeing as having to kill a human every time the sun goes down has a tendency to get annoying after a bit. It involves you meeting up with some witches who claim to have an intricate cure for lycanthropy. The process involves you grabbing a certain flower and some berries, and then killing an innocent Nord woman and taking her heart, and then infusing the heart with the berries and flower, and putting your lycanthropy into it, and then placing it into the woman, and then having her transform into a werewolf, and then you kill her. Which is actually a pretty fucked up and interesting way to achieve this end. What's funny is that if you turn on the witches, they have a note that indicates that there's a rare scroll that will cure lycanthropy outright, for use in emergencies only. Which you would think curing the Nerevarine would be a pretty high priority, but whatever, maybe they don't know who I am. What's even funnier is that if you know about this, you can reload your save, jump up, grab the scroll, and not have to go through Michael Kirkbride's beautiful dark twisted fantasy. Overall, Bloodmoon is a pretty damn good DLC with a few less than stellar parts. It definitely deserved the praise that it got on release, and I'd say that it's a welcome addition to Morrowind as a whole. What's funny is that it actually cheapened Skyrim's Dragonborn DLC for me when it did the whole 6-stone quest line really well. And that was definitely the highlight of this whole thing for me, along with the integration of Hircine's hunt. The not so good stuff came in the form of some of the lesser East Empire Company quests and the overall implementation of lycanthropy. But the reality is that even with those sore spots, Bloodmoon is a must-play DLC for those who enjoy Morrowind as a whole. Now if someone could just send me back in time, I'll try to get in good with Kotaku and write a killer review 19 years ago. Morrowind was put together during a time in ancient history 25 or so years ago when most developers' primary goals seemed to be to push the boundaries of game design and create something that they wanted to play. I know it's easy to dunk on modern AAA developers for releasing unfinished games that include a plethora of generally unwanted features by demand of their publishers, and of course a lot of modern developers do still care about the end product. At least I like to think so. But it's fascinating to take a look at the attitude of a lot of prominent modern-day indie developers and compare their passion to the leaders of the industry decades prior. And I feel like that passion is the core of why so many older gamers hold on to memories of games like Morrowind and its DLC. Tribunal and Bloodmoon really fleshed out the game as a whole, and pushed what it was about and what it could do in a multitude of ways. Yes, there are some balancing issues, a few tacked-on quests, and quite a few of the differences when you chose a side hardly matter in the overall scheme of things. But the devs really put in the time to make these expansions shine as worthwhile purchases, and I had a great time witnessing them unfold for the first time. Thanks for watching. I'm debating whether or not to roll right into Daedric quests or the like for Morrowind to help out with keeping content flowing while we're in the process of moving. I haven't decided if that's what I'll do yet, but it's an idea. Until then though, I have merch over at my merch shop, including that limited time shirt from before. Wow, would you look at that? It's pretty good. I also have a Twitch where I try to stream nearly every Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, but I have some real life stuff going on right now, so that might be spotty for a bit. I've got a Twitter where I pretty much just post my videos, but sometimes there's other things. I've got a Discord where people hang out and shoot the shit in the meantime, probably. And I've got a Patreon. And that's it. Have a good one.